second. Okay, perfect. With that, proposition one, you now have the floor.
Am I visible and audible?
Yep, you
Am I visible?
are. Excuse me,
Okay.
can you hold for a second? Okay, perfect. You can start.
Okay. Are we starting? In three, two, one. Just because a black child, due to the lottery of birth, was placed as a poor child, we don't think that that black child deserves to be treated any less than any other child. Only proposition starts to fight the systemic inequality within the education system. A step forward is only what you get at proposition. Very proud to propose this motion. Four pieces of characterization before I move on. The first is, how does this leniency look like and how does this grade inflation look like? There are three things I'm going to tell you within this. Number one, we don't think that this leniency or inflation is very extreme in nature. That looks like teachers actively pushing your grade from a B to an A. If you have 78%, maybe she puts an extra 2% and actively pushes you to 80, right? Insofar as that is true, that means that, and also, right, notice that this is going to be proportional, right? These teachers are not going to be giving it to everybody, rather they who within children who they see that potential exists within these children who have worked hard, however, rather due to, like, for instance, financial issues, they may not have been able to perform, right? And the second idea is that this is not going to be told to anybody, right? These children aren't going to know the fact that they're being pushed up, right? This is going to be implicit. This is not going to be told to children whether they're from the majority or the minority. And thirdly, we think that, right, this looks like for children who have or objectively have lower income, right? That looks like, for instance, when you have admission processes taking place, that's for children who have objectively lower income within minority statuses, right? The second piece of characterization is, why is the way children are treated in this debate are very important. And notice, panel, there are two reasons why children are important. Number one, because these children are going through their first periods of secondary socialization. These children are actively inherently are developing, and this is their first interaction with the real world, right? The second thing is that the first person that these children interact with are their teachers. Notice that these are their developing years, and the types of interaction that they have are very important. And insofar as that is true, these teachers then have a distinct responsibility onto these children. There are two reasons why there's a responsibility. These teachers have a responsibility on these children. Number one, notice that they face the same problems, right? If this teacher has been from a minority background, she can actively resonate and understand what a black child may have had to gone through due to, like, financial stresses, and she's the one who will understand them the most, right? And secondly, we tell you, because you are from the same community, you actively have a responsibility on each other, right? Well, the third piece of characterization is how the other forms of solutions existing within the status quo are simply inadequate. I'm going to give you two things in this. Number one, quotas within the current status quo. This is going to be very brief because I know that opposition is a smart team and they're not going to argue on this. But the first idea is how quota systems exist. We tell you quota systems are simply seen as tokenistic forms of mechanisms within the status quo, where they're not actively representing, increasing the representation of people, whether that's structurally actively helping more allocation within the status quo. And secondly, notice that financial aid, as in the education system, does not actively work within the status quo, because stuff like application fees are very expensive. Stuff like, for instance, there are limited resources where only some amount of children are able to get these in the first place. Then, on to my first argument on why this is principally unjustified. Before I move into the main crux of this argument, it is important to understand what these minorities look like in the first place. They are twofold. Number one, notice that these minorities have low material capital and cultural capital. Notice, due to the advent, for instance, within America, due to the advent of slavery, black people have been structurally stripped of the amount of resources that they've had, whereas the majority have actively have gained power and money, and inherently the main amount of power, right? And that means that there's extreme poverty existing for these minorities, where the power is in the hands of the majority. Notice that that means that these minorities are systemically weak, that they don't have the same amount of resources to compete within the status quo. Where notice panel, this is very crucial to note, where an excellent black child will never be able to be better than an ordinary white child because that white child just has more resources than that black child. Where within an SAT, that black child will never be able to surpass 1300 because he simply does not have the resources that a white child may have and the active help that he gets. That means that there's an unequal opportunity existing within the status quo, means that the structure of society is simply based in an unequal manner. The second idea is that there's systemic bias existing that looks like labeling within educational systems, where black children are simply stereotyped and gender stereotyped in a manner where if just because they're black, they're meant to be stupid, right? Meant to be, for instance, lower intellect. That is to say that that means that there is an internalization of these narratives in the status quo, where in the instances you follow opposition's model, you do not have lenient marking, and you have strict marking existing in the status quo. What happens is when black children, due to lower resources, internalize such narratives, what happens is that there's a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, where in their minds they think that they're inherently limited to these grades and are inherently weak. That looks like, for instance, more systemic bias existing where they're literally not represented within the curriculum. Take the example of the American curriculum. You have no mentions of Malcolm X, the person who was one of the sole drivers of the American of the Black history, right? What is then the harm, and why is it much worse on opposition? Number one, alienation takes place at opposition. Notice that children do not feel that they're an equal part of education, right? Of the educational system. A lot of black children end up dropping out because of the fact that they don't feel an equal part of the education system. They feel that they're structurally so that the system is so deterministic that they can that no matter how hard they work, they inherently cannot make it to the top. Take the example of how 40% of black African Americans drop out before they actively can graduate college, right? The second idea is that they internalize bad narratives. I've already told you how there's a deterministic chain of thought within these people because they internalize bad narratives, right? How are we then on a comparative much better off? Number one, you ensure a level playing field, right? Notice that because these people are structurally inferior, what happens is that now you have to break the structural inequality by actively giving them lenient marking. Because of the fact that they've had lower resources, now when you are actively leniently marking them, now you're at least giving them somewhat of a level playing field where in the resources there's some amount of proportional amount of outcome to the active hard work that they put on. I think that this is very important to note because in a non-consequential this is a non-consequentialist idea where even if there aren't tangible benefits, we as society are meant to and ought to actively give these people a level playing field, right? But the second idea is you break the norm in the status quo, where the norm that I already talked about labeling exists, where the white American child is actively the smarter child, right? This labeling is broken when a black child can actively get the same amount of grades as a white child. That means that these people then have more motivation, right? Because they don't feel inferior, they don't feel that they're any much that they're any less. Rather than dropping out, they then actively focus to long-term goals. That is to say that inherently that they think that they can actively be a part of the that they can be a part of the workforce, right? Notice that this sets a better precedent for when their children actively come upon when they have children, they will actively have a better net impact for the future generation, right? Notice that the cycles of poverty that exist is because these people are systemically undereducated. Now that undereducation does not exist because these people now have an incentive to actively pursue education more because they inherently do not have that negative narrative, right? But the last idea is how there's a positive self-fulfilling prophecy. Now you feel that you are as capable as anybody else. When the rich kid and you have the same rate, you don't feel bad about yourself. That mental barrier that exists within the status quo actively is broken. Now when you are inherently more educated, you are going more into the workforce. What happens is that you have more representation for these individuals within the workforce, right? That happens more representation in the status quo. This will be one of the most only structural ways that you actively get change. Panel Sylvia Plath said that for women to get recognition, for women to have space, is for them to get a room to give that space. We at Proposition give that room.
Great. Thank you so much for that speech. With that, opposition one, you now have the floor.
Right, can I have 30 seconds?
Sure. Op 1. Opposition for a speaker. You're not audible. We can't hear you. That's okay. Just let me know once you fixed it.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yep, you're audible. Please start.
All right, perfect. Um, I'll prefer my POIs verbally, and let me just set up my timer. All right, perfect. I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. Let's quickly take down some major characterization flaws on side proposition as a whole. Firstly, let's talk about the characterization of leniency. They talked about how it won't be as extreme, but again, they would bump up another student's grades from a B to an A, saying that there will be a 2% increase, but then again, there would be a the grades would be bumped up and therefore there would be some sort of you could say favoritism in that sort. I don't understand how that is in line, because that in itself is contradictory, right? Because if you say it's not very extreme, you're still bumping up some grades, and even then if you claim that it's a 2% perhaps increase, it won't be then as you could say it won't be as effective, right? So I don't understand how what on their side what the actual idea is. Either will it be more like will it be bumping up the grade on a more you could say marginalized level, or will it be small? I don't understand that. This isn't moderate characterization. Bumping grades up will happen regardless of the student, because all are a minority as a whole. They said it will only go they will only go for potential students perhaps who have the potential, but that isn't the case on side opposition, because we think all students, no matter who are a minority, whether racial minority, ethnic minority, they will face that favoritism and they will have their grades bumped up no matter the case. People, and thirdly, they said that this would be implicit and that people would not know whether these grades were bumped up or not. They will just be on a small marginalized level. I'd like to point out that's not the case, because A, this won't be on a marginalized level. It will be to a great extent. And B, even if it was, there were other factors like perhaps self-checking, rechecking, teacher conferrals, and other students gathering up to like compare grades, etc. Many factors that contribute to this as a whole. And in essence to that, at the end of the day, that would not be implicit. It would reach out to other people, and therefore this is also discussed in a positive case why this would be bad as a whole. So moving on to some basic characterization on offside counter characterization as to what would this teacher then even look like. Well, as the motion suggests, he or she would be a disadvantaged person. Previously, he or she would be disadvantaged previously as well, as mentioned in the motion. He or she has gone through the racial injustice in the system when he or she was younger as well then. And so what does this inflation of grades look like on our side? Well, it looks like giving a higher mark without reason, perhaps deliberately awarding marks with where they shouldn't have been awarded in the first place, changing whole grades without reason, as proposition also said, but couldn't like link reasons as to why it could, and again bumping up or awarding more to a disadvantaged person or a minority, even if the work is not up to par. Moving on to my first line of argument then as to how why the actor will not want to support an unfair education system. Panel, understand that the teacher we are talking about is from an underprivileged background, right? Therefore, we can assume he or she has faced several problems in the education system themselves. What are the problems with this unfair education system then? Well, this can look like several things. First of all, discrimination, where A, this may look like teachers giving priority to children with the rich parents because of donations, or B, this can look like teachers having racial or ethnic biases against students. It could also look like teachers expensive in these disadvantaged families, and this can usually they can usually not afford it. This means that they don't have the same opportunity as those who are comparatively well off. Essentially, the system is against them from the moment they are born. And so, why does the teacher care about this then? Since we have proved how this actor has gone through several problems with injustices of the education system, the actor is very likely to sympathize with these underprivileged children who are going through the same structural injustices that he faced, right? Thus, his incentives are likely posed against the system. He hates this system of favoritism and discrimination. Thus, he is likely to not use the same system of favoritism for his own use as well. Because think about it: if he got discriminated against because he's black by a white teacher, as the teacher sided with his own race, and now if he does the same thing, if he does the same with siding with black people and giving them free marks, he'd be becoming part of the same system, right? How is he doing that? One, he's undermining the principle of meritocracy by awarding grades based on ethnicity, undervaluing the grades themselves, and two, he is discrediting, undervaluing the efforts of other students who are not underprivileged. This could look like other middle class students who have spent a lot of time and effort to work for their grades. By awarding underprivileged children inflated grades, the teacher is doing an injustice to these other students who study under him as well. Then, why is this bad? These are the exact injustices the teacher had to go through himself. Since we have already established that this teacher is against this system due to the oppression he went through, we think he is very likely to not support and empower such a system because it is the human psyche to not want to become the person you hate. Thus, he resort to other methods of helping, which could look like perhaps A, providing more resources to their disadvantaged students. This could look like taking them to public libraries to help them study, or helping pay fees, etc. The financial problem will still exist on prop side as well, despite inflating rates. Which, by the way, I don't get two more points to these kids on their side will help bring them at equal footing to other students, as they mentioned in the first characterization. I didn't understand that yet again. And B, giving them more attention to help them overcome the structural disadvantage to bring them at an equal footing of other students. Then C, giving them tutoring outside of school, and D, encouraging love despite boundaries in all of his students to avoid discrimination between the peers, so they could help each other as a whole. Then this would be possible because Prop mentioned this. This is time of secondary socialization, means the racial hate and etc. has not yet been instilled within these kids. So whatever the teacher teaches them could help them build an immunity to such narratives that discriminate minorities. He wouldn't want even other students who are kids themselves and didn't inflict injustice on him to suffer injustice on his hands as well. This
Point.
way, we co-opt Prop's principle while not undermining the moral values of the teacher. Before that, yes,
Do you think that a student who has to work in after school job can be expected to perform the same as everyone else when he's poor and has to literally work after school?
we told you that yes, they are disadvantaged as a whole when they are a racial or ethnic minority. Yes, we agree with that. But the thing is, the teacher himself owes a moral responsibility to not enact the same injustice he was enacted for, right? So he provides certain things like resources, perhaps stationery, books, other means of help which are more lenient, perhaps, and which are more acceptable, not just bumping up grades and doing the same injustice he was faced by. So moving on to my second line of argument as to how the actor's incentive to help his students are fulfilled by not inflating grades. We all agree how this actor sympathizes and relates with the students, right? Considering this, we can say that the actor will do everything in his power to help these children and make their situation better. Essentially, he wants his students to reach their full potential and safeguard them from systemic injustices. He would do this in several ways that we identified before in the previous line of argument. How does inflating the students then grades worsen their edge situation then? Well, one, understand that when these students are given inflated grades, they will have a very distorted worldview about how much effort is required to get good results and excel in life situations. When these students are given inflated grades, then they will be led to believe that they have to do a lot less effort. This would result in them not fulfilling their fullest potential and instead would worsen their situation as they now would become lazy and careless, thinking about the bare minimum effort will get them the best results. What happens then? A, when they go out in the world and not find the same advantage, they will still face this racism later on in life when they face the challenges, they'll not be able to face it. And B, those kids when they when they have not learned anything would be at future disadvantage to get jobs, etc. when it's already very hard for them to get jobs due to discrimination. Secondly, even the students might get bullied or discriminated against if others find out he is undergoing favoritism as well. Because students, when they see each other's tests, are likely to notice the inflation of grades, as mentioned before. This bullying would hurt these students more, hurting their mental health, worsening their conditions, and this goes against the teacher's purpose to help these students as a whole, and instead would worsen their situation. So proud to oppose.
Great. Thank you so much for that speech. Proposition two, you now have the floor.
Can I get a minute?
Sure.
Thank you.
Proposition two.
Just let me set up my timer, please. Am I audible?
Yep, you're perfectly audible.
All right, just give me a second. I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. Adjudicator, the problem we find with opposition's entire character, with their entire characterization, is that they take this debate to very unfair means, where we tell you that it is literally impossible to justify the raising of grades merely over racial means. And it's at that point in time where we tell you that we bring to you this idea about the student having potential, and it's only in that instance where we allow that raise. At the point in time where opposition really does not engage with that argument and tries to strawman through it, we feel that their entire case becomes very problematic, because they never really deal with our characterization with our characterization within the first place. Two clashes then. Firstly, is this leniency justified, and secondly, would these students be better off on our side of the world? First clash then, whether this leniency is justified or not. Now, what opposition tries to frame this out is that this leniency looks like favoritism, and that is not. This leniency looks like favoritism, and that is not effective.
POI.
Two responses to this. Firstly, understand that this actually. Firstly, understand, we tell you that this is not based around favoritism. We tell you that we actually bring to you the certain reason behind it, where we tell you that a certain student that has the potential but is not unable to reach it due to their due to them being structurally disadvantaged. It's only at that point in time we bring to you this justifiable cause on our side of the world. Secondly, understand that this actually becomes effective simply because of the fact that these were disenfranchised students. These have the structural disadvantage, and now they're better off on our and now we're actually making them better off on our side by providing this certain support. Now, what does this support look like? This could look like you
you essentially having this could look like your grade being bumped up from a B to A simply because you got a 78%, or this could look like deadline extensions because of a student running a night job, because of a student running a night job and not having that time to submit their assignment on time. Now secondly, they talk about this idea about this education system being unfair, and them killing this idea of meritocracy, and how that's unfair to those people, and how it's unfair to those people that actually put in the effort. Three responses to this: firstly, understand, we tell you that you aren't really negating the efforts of the other students that are putting in the time and effort. We tell you will award them for their effort. We just don't show that same level of leniency. That does not mean we completely negate their effort. Something we that idea that never really stands. But secondly, understand that within the status quo, you've got this issue of a lack of you've got this issue of there not being a level playing field, simply because one group has this idea of restrictive capital, whereas the other does not. At that point in time, we believe it is the obligation of this teacher who comes from that same disenfranchised system. They are disenfranchised, they come from that same disadvantaged system. We believe it is then their obligation to try to help and support them to their case. And thirdly, understand that we're not bringing this insane race that they so try to call it as unjustified, where we already talked to you how this comes within certain limitations. At that point in time, we tell you it is very much justified, because you actually then are able to help these students that otherwise were disadvantaged. Second clash then within this debate: where would these students be better off? Now, two things we get from opposition. Firstly, their idea how there are other means of help, how the teacher could use other means of help. There are two issues over here. Firstly, understand a teacher that already comes from this structurally disadvantaged background does not have that same level of material, would not have that level of material capital where they could help out a majority of such disadvantaged students. At that point in time, the only help that they can provide within opposition's world would be very minimal, which could essentially look like provision of certain books or stationery. But we never but it really doesn't tackle the core of the issue, where it doesn't break these barriers, where we tell you that these people who are structurally disadvantaged will be actually able to get into a level playing field. You never really achieve that, something our first speaker talks about, but we never really get any engagement whatsoever. Secondly, then they talk about these students won't reach full potential within their practical life because you're giving them this leverage. Two things over here: firstly, understand you actually get better potential on our side of the world, because understand within the status quo, these structurally disadvantaged students really do not have this ideological instillment within them, where they can't compete with that majority student that is better off. At that point in time, they never really have that incentive to do such good, or make it to that level of work or life where these more advantaged students are. At that point in time, where we're actually able to bring both of
You
these
are
groups to some level of equality, we tell you you can achieve that better potential on our side of the world. And secondly, as we already talked about within our characterization, if you aren't putting in if these students don't seem to have that effort or potential, we aren't really giving them free grade bump ups or such things. At that point in time, we tell you at that point in time, we tell you that they're able to better reach potential on our side of the world. On that note, I'll be moving on towards my positive argumentation, which essentially is this line of argument
what are
about how you bring this change in in the environment of education. Now, the premise around this is that reform comes from within. That is at the point in time where a society realizes a certain ethnic group can do well within the system. At that point in time, the society is then bound to make structural changes to allow them in. Now, I'll give you two examples for this. Firstly, this idea about how educational segregation existed within the United States, where black students had their own entire different system, but at the point in time, black students which actually had that potential were allowed within the white school system. It was actually seen that that these people can be on the same level, and that at that point in time, the structure And at that point in time, the structural disadvantages for these black students were dealt with. Or secondly, how women entered politics, and how that gave them the right to vote. Now what is this issue with the disadvantaged group that exists within the status quo? They aren't fully able to push over these thresholds because, well, a, they've got a lack of material capital, and b, because of cultural limitations. Now this could look like them having restricted speech codes instead of these elaborative speech codes. At that point in time, we're going to make marking for them easier, and that allows them to push over this threshold. For example, going from an B to A, or an A to to an A star. Now, how does this change, and how do we then bring change at proposition? By pushing over, society sees that these kids can do good, and hence they have this incentive to bring change within the system. How does that happen, and what does this change look like? Three things. Firstly, when they achieve better, once they're able to achieve better grades and have a more equal level of education, you're able to break through these stereotypes, where other teachers are then bound to treat those students the same, and this leads to and this essentially transfers within the students, where they're able to act like we can also achieve the same, and essentially creates this domino effect of where they're able to improve. Secondly, high achievers from such demographics will be able to create support groups, such as bringing in legislative change through pressure, or giving tutoring, or providing tutoring, or helping these students within the first place. Thirdly, more social awareness by taking additional courses, which allows them to understand their own problems and bring changes within. This leads to two impacts. Firstly, society is able to recognize the potential, and then brings this change. And secondly, you bring more social awareness. On both of those notes, very proud.
Thank you so much for that speech. With that, opposition two, you now have the
Can I have
floor.
30 seconds?
Sure.
Um, I'll be starting. Wait a second. Yes. I'll be starting my. Can you see me and am I audible?
I can't see you, but you are perfectly audible.
Oh, sorry. Can you not see me?
No. Okay, yeah, you're visible now. Perfect.
Right. So I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Right. So I don't think side proposition really understands what this debate is about, right? Understand that the motion clearly states this is an actor debate. What side proposition had to do was prove why the actor would even do the things that they have tried to point out in their arguments, right? I think they did not do a very good job at it. So moving on, first, I would like to take down their characterization, which they have kept pushing, right? So they characterize this debate and inflation of these grades as something that is not so extreme and something that is very proportional. Two things. First of all, this is an extremely unfair characterization on prop side, right? Because understand how stupid this is, right? What a stupid thing this is. I will prove in my case why the actor will not risk something risk his career and something so big for something that has no tangible profit, as they have already conceded in their arguments. And secondly, about how this is proportional, please explain to me what your criteria of proportionalism is, right? Because according to you, by extension of your logic, if a child from a minority household does not put an extra hour of work, he is somehow disqualified from help from you. Then they say that nobody will be told. Understand that that is also factually wrong. There are so many reasons which I will give in my positive case as to why people are very likely to find out about this great inflation in the first place. And then they say, then they come up here and they claim about why this teacher has a responsibility to these children, and two responsibilities. Firstly, because they resonate with their problems, and secondly, they're from the same community as these children. Please explain to me why the actor would risk their own jobs and their careers for this, right? Because understand, the actor we are talking about in this debate, sure, he cares about his students a lot,
but he's not some self-sacrificing saint, right? This actor will not sacrifice himself completely. I will prove that in my case why it is very harmful for him. And then they talk about how quotas and financial aid are extremely tokenistic. Um, there is a very huge problem solution gap in their case, right? Because their solution to tokenistic ways of helping is their solution of that is inflating rates slightly, and I think that that is even more tokenistic. So, what idea do you even have? Let me take down their first idea about how this is about how it is principally just for this teacher, right? They say that since these people they have low material capital and low cultural capital, they are extremely poor and they're systematically weak. There are systemic biases against this, so the teacher will somehow help them to better their situation. A few things. Firstly, as I have pointed out before, this is an actor debate. They had to prove why the actor would care about this moral responsibility. Since they did not do this, I'll do it for them, right? The thing in this motion is that the actor cares about his students because he relates with them, right? So the world where the students are helped more is the world where the teacher will probably do. My first speaker proved to you how helping them by inflating their grades will harm them, right? Because of two things: it will make them lazy and it will not make them work hard. And secondly, they will not be able to fulfill their potential. On our side, we help them realize their full potential by helping them in more meaningful ways. Like, for example, giving them extra time from ourselves, right? The teacher giving them extra time. Um, and then moving on to their second idea about second argument and second issue, which were about self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So there is a huge logical problem with their idea. I will prove in my positive case why these people are very likely to get caught and people will find out that they are inflating grades. When this happens, understand that these children will actually be harmed. Why is that? Because now these people, they will actually start to believe that the only way they can be successful is if they cheat in the first place. And then they come up here and they claim that these teachers do not have the capital to help these children. Again, that is also factually incorrect. That is wrong in truth value, because the teachers, they have access to school resources. These teachers can also take out time from their own personal lives to help these children because they relate with them. And then let me take down their last argument, which was about change. They say that since these people cannot pass the threshold, they are very disadvantaged, and and
You
inflating
Oscar.
grades will help them pass. Before that, I'll take your view, Aishwarya.
On your side of the world, people drop out of education. On our side of the world, at least these people, even if we're blatantly lying to them, at least they have a chance within the education system.
Right? I think what you're saying is completely unrealistic, because on your side, when these people, they think that the bare minimum of effort will get them the best results, they will actually be more harmed in the long term on your side, because now these people will not know what actual effort looks like. Right, taking down the third idea about change, it does not solve the problem of these peoples, right? It does not solve the source of this problem. Understand that inflating rates is a very temporary and meaningless change, and these people, they will still not be able to pass these exams if they're not helped in a more meaningful way. Can you please tell my time? My timer
You're at
actually went.
5:28.
Right. Moving on to my moving on to my third line of argument about why the actor will be afraid of backlash and repercussion. Right. Understand that there are several reasons as to why the teacher is very likely to face backlash. First of all, even though the education system is unjust and corrupt, it still exists, right? If unjust practice is caught, it will lead to severe consequences, right? For example, in schools, several teachers recheck a paper. If this teacher is found changing and inflating grades, it will be very bad for him. Secondly, since the teacher is from a racial and ethnic minority, there will be a lot of colleagues and admin that already have personal biases against them, right? This could look like them punishing the teacher disproportionately strictly, or this could also look like them already keeping an eye on this teacher because they think an eye on this teacher, waiting for them to make a mistake because they have racial biases against them. And thirdly, students will also probably figure out that the teacher is inflating their grades, right? Why is that? Because students usually know how each of them are performing, and when they see that the person who did not put any effort is now starting to get better grades than them, they will probably find out, and they will take this to figures of authority, like for example, parents or the admin. Now, why is this very bad for the actor? Uh, Firstly, the actor might simply get straight up fired. Secondly, the actor's teaching license might be revoked. Third, the racist and ethnic stereotypes that underprivileged people are morally egregious and can only win if they cheat. They will now be strengthened and worsen these children's situations. Fourth, the actor will also literally not fulfill the only purpose for which he inflated these children's grades in the first place. Why is that? What is that, right? He wanted to help these children. Instead, he will now harm them because these children, they might now face penalization by the admin for a teacher's mistake. And secondly, these children will now be even more discriminated against because of the stereotype that this teacher strengthened. This proves why the actor is extremely unlikely to take such a huge risk that will actually harm these children. Um, Instead, the actor is more benefited on our side, right? Why is that? Understand that if the teacher retains his job, he has more of a chance to get a promotion in the future. This could help this could lead to him helping these underprivileged children in a more meaningful way, right? It could lead to him helping them in a more meaningful way and giving them more resources, providing them more resources. And secondly, it could also look like this teacher being able to advocate against structural injustice on their side of the house. Thank you for being the side that caters to the most relevant stakeholder and not harms them. I think we easily take this debate.
Great. Thank you so much for that speech. Proposition 3, you now have the floor.
Can I have like 30 seconds to set up my camera and timer and stuff?
Yep, sure.
Just give me 1 second. Am I visible and audible?
Yep, you're perfectly visible and audible.
I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. You cannot raise someone's grade simply on the basis of their identity. That is a principle that is irrefutable. That is not something that you can debate. That is why the entire case line that team opposition has ran is so unfair, because the thing that they are perpetuating is not something that is debatable. What is debatable is that if we recognize that these people with different identities are disadvantaged by the system, should they be allowed certain allowances so that they can be at the same level as other students? At that point, what do we mean by proportionality? We mean that children will not be downmarked for late submissions. We mean that children will not have marks cut for having linguistic issues, because the entire system of education is based on British English and doesn't acknowledge any other language. We mean that there will be 2-point raises if they didn't have the books to, for example, start studying for the exam in time. Those are the kinds of mechanisms that we believe we can use within this debate. But then 3 main clashes. The first of equity versus equality. In this, their first idea was that favoritism is inherently bad. Two refutations to this. First of all, mechanisms exist already globally to help people who are disadvantaged. That's why you have food stamps for the homeless, and they're not called sellouts for accepting those food stamps at a point in time where they actively need them for their survival. Secondly, teachers already edit grades sometimes. It's not an insane, unprecedented sort of thing that team opposition is making it out to be. This also refutes their idea on how teachers are going to be oh so scared of doing this. Understand that around the world, students often email their professors to get a slight grade bump or a slight extension, so on and so forth. But the problem then is that these minorities are too scared to ask for this grade bump because they feel like the structure around them is built against them, because that is what they are taught by their communities, that hey, this school, this college, this office will be against you for the rest of your life. You should not ask for help. You need to sit quietly. You will not achieve the same as everyone else. That is why this is necessary in the first place. But then the idea on whether or not students deserve it, understand that to a large extent they conceded to this, but I'll still talk about this. Understand that the reason that students don't do so well is out of their control. Three structural reasons within this. Number one, cultural capital. Understand that the entire educational system is built around colonial standards. It's built in British English. SAT texts are written by white authors. The examples we're given in our economics papers are white-based scenarios. They're simply things that these students cannot relate to, and because they cannot relate to them, they have a much harder time answering questions on them. Number two, material capital. Understand at a point in time, these students cannot afford to buy books at time. They cannot afford tutors or academy while everyone else can. They are actively going to score less. But then thirdly, their environment. Understand that people of different races, it has been proven by study after study, time and time again, are treated worse by teachers and the education system at large. But then even at home, they are taught that education system is not working for you. It is inherently against you, and thus it will not, you cannot achieve within it. At that point, understand that none of these factors are under their control. At that point, they deserve the allowances that we give them or that teachers give them. But then the second clash within this debate, which is about backlash and which is about incentive / responsibility of the teacher. In this, their main argument that was that this is a lot of risk and the teacher will face backlash and may lose their job. First of all, in our worst case, if we believe that this is inherently discovered, we believe at the end of the day it will develop discourse on why their teacher feels it is necessary to do this. This looks like them actively showing up in front of Congress or showing up in front of the Senate and being like, I believe my students are disadvantaged by this system that structurally alienates them. Please do something about it. And in a world that is becoming inherently more and more progressive, we believe that they are likely to be listened to. Number two, teachers independently report end of year grades. It is an amalgamation of every single assignment and every single thing that you've done. At that point, there isn't that much foresight or oversight on what the teacher is doing. So it's not very likely for them to be caught. That's why we see it happening literally everywhere in every school in Pakistan to at least some degree for the students that have merit but could not score for whatever particular reason. So we believe that it's not something that can immediately be caught and teachers can immediately be reported for. But then thirdly, it is a cultural norm within education. Like I told you in my first class, it is something that teachers already do when students ask for it. Just in this case, minority students do not have the ability to be like, hey, teacher, can you please raise my grade? Because they believe that the structure is built against them. But then lastly, understand that it is so unfair to tell us that the teacher will do something drastic enough for her to lose her job. Understand that while yes, an amalgamation of everything she will be doing to every student might put her under the eye of the admin, we tell you that it is generally not so extreme that they can kick her out. It might be a 2-point race, a 3-point race, slightly lenient marking, ignoring linguistical errors. It is not generally something that can be found out so easy. And then lastly, understand that this teacher has common sense. She is going to be smart about the way that she edits these grades. She's going to be smart about where she makes changes. She might make changes in the self-reported grades. She might make changes in the report to admin grades. She will do them on the places where there is less oversight so she cannot be caught. But then their idea that hey, the teacher should prevent them alternatives like affirmative action or quota system, etc. Understand firstly, the teachers are extremely overworked with very little bandwidth to do all of this extra stuff, right? At that point, you cannot tell her to tutor a bunch of new kids, but you can ask her to slightly bump up kids' grades so that they can keep up with the white majority classrooms. And then secondly, understand that we live in a world where right-wing populism is on the rise. Every day we see a right-wing populist leader being elected. The problem with this is that this demographic is shutting down things like quota systems, like affirmative action. At that point, we look at how the Supreme Court shut down affirmative action in the first place. We feel this as an alternative when all of these systems are being shut down. But then the idea that, hey, she was hurt by favoritism, so she wouldn't want that for her student. Understand that this disenfranchised teacher was hurt by a system that was built against her. And you know what hurts her more? To see so many students failing who have the merit to pass simply because they are of a racial minority and the system that they exist in is built around them. At that point, you will have more job fulfillment if she can actively help them achieve their goals and help them pass. Before the last clash was a relatively small one, yes.
Why do you think this?
I'm so sorry, I don't have time. The last clash is where are students generally better off? Understand that first idea within this was that they'll have false effort and feel like they don't need to work. First of all, this is false on truth value because the teacher simply will not do this for students who show absolutely no merit. If they show a little bit of intelligence or a little bit of effort, only then will the teacher help them a little bit to reach the mark. But then secondly, Understand how when students are helped by the system, they will inherently explore it more. Right now, what students do within education systems is take the path of least resistance. But then when they see that they can achieve more, they are likely to take more subjects. They are likely to take more humanities or explorative subjects, which can help them understand the social dynamics of the society that they are in, and inherently the reasons that they are disenfranchised by society. This looks like me taking sociology after getting 3 A's in O2 and realizing that I actively can get good grades. At that point, I took sociology and understood disenfranchisement as a whole. That's what students like that will generally do. But then the idea that treatment for them will get worse. Understand it will only get better if you break stereotypes, which you cannot do in a structure that is built against you. Only if teachers see that, oh, black students achieve just as much as white students, will they start to treat the black students in their classrooms the same, and then generally those black students will perform better. Why is this the case? Because we understand that within the status quo, there exists a bias where you start acting the way that you are treated. That's why criminals who are treated like criminals continue to act such. Meanwhile, when you are treated like you are a human and you have the ability to be better, that is how you will generally be treated. At that point, if we break apart the stereotypes that exist in modern society for these students, they are more likely to perform or to try and perform so that, because now they don't think that the structure is built against them. We tell you that in our world, these students will not be educationally stagnant until there is some change in the system for resolve. Because understand that they agreed with our problems but gave us no viable solutions to solve them. For all these reasons, proposition.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that speech. Opposition 3, you now have the floor.
Can I get a few seconds?
Yep, sure. Opposition 3, please start.
Really audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. So I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. The proposition side here has been as unrealistic and as unfair to us as they have been with our POIs when they told us, they didn't take us and they didn't take any POIs in the first two speeches, but then in the third speech when we're asking them, they're like it's too late when it clearly wasn't. That literally tells us their clear understanding of this debate as well. Because think about it, when they say, students are literally structurally disadvantaged, suddenly when you increase secretly a few grades of the students, because think about it, students themselves know exactly what they performed in their tests, but when they see that they did a C-level grade test, but then suddenly they got an A in their test, they would not doubt it, and they would just be like, oh, structurally we are just now equal, because somehow all their problems of not being financially well off, having doing so many jobs, etc., suddenly they are solved by just a few marks. And suddenly I wanted to ask them this in my POI as well, that if I'm a student who is doing efforts to just get a B grade, how would I be able to, when they clearly told us that the reason this student is not being able to study more is because they are structurally disadvantaged, because they are doing so many jobs. Suddenly now the teacher is giving me A grades, I would suddenly get motivated and want to work more. Even if I want to work more, would I be able to, because this problem still exists? And secondly, I would not want to work more because now I'm getting the same grade with just the bare minimum effort which my third speaker and first speaker talked about. Like I don't sorry, second and first speaker talked about. I don't believe how that's even true. But then secondly, about they said, we're not going to. By the way, there was a clear contradiction, which is very important in this bit. When they said, we're not giving them marks based on identity because we know that it is not able to justify. I think they clearly lost this debate based on that, because think about it. They're saying we're going to increase grades of potential students, but then who are these potential students? The people with the same identity as the teacher. At this point, when they clearly conceded that this is unjustified, I believe they lost this debate. But then thirdly, about structurally, it's like, because books are, by the way, it was too late to bring all these mechanisms and structural reasons at third, which is I refuted, that they said it's like hard to read English etc for these minorities because it's like structurally disadvantaged because all books are English. If you give them 2% more marks, how are these students then suddenly able to read English? How are they still how are these problems even getting solved? How any of the problems they have identified getting solved? We don't get any mechanism for that as well. And I believe it's too late to give it at reply. Yes, I'll take POI.
At least on our side of the world, when they get high grades, they're more motivated to study and they don't feel that they're any less inferior than anybody else. How do
I clearly refuted that just before this. I believe you should have been listening to my speech, that even if they do get motivated, when you clearly yourself told us, then they are doing multiple jobs, etc. They, if they wanted to, did they not want to do this before? And if they want to, how would they still be able to study more, even if they are motivated? And I told you they would not be motivated as well, but I think you're not clearly listening to me, and I won't be taking any more POS, so don't waste your time. Moving on to my issues about the moral thing. We told you that teacher themselves have been structurally oppressed, and it took them a lot of time to come to this position. So they want to hold their integrity as a teacher. They want to uphold the moral values that are assigned to us, because this position they got it after so much struggle. And at this point, we're literally co-opting their moral benefit of helping other kids, etc. When we gave you other things that these teacher will be able to help those kids with giving them more time, etc., or taking them to public libraries to get them issued books, etc. They said their response to this was, oh, they don't have enough resources because this teacher is structurally disadvantaged. I believe when this person has become a teacher, if such a teacher existed in LACAS, they would getting enough paid to be able to even help people, these kids with fees, etc. And at that point, these kids would not be able to, would not need to do multiple jobs to afford even fees. But even then, even if that's not the case, I believe other things allocating them time, more attention, and giving them, if they're not able to read English, helping them learn how to read English in their break time, or perhaps taking 1 or 30 more minutes after their own class. I believe this would be better off. But talking about moral thing, when we told you that this person has been morally oppressed, think about it. Two things. First, that when this teacher was a kid themselves, a white person preferred white kids over them. So now, as a black person, if this person is preferring black kids over them, it is literally repeating the same pattern. He is becoming what he is hating. And at that point, I don't believe any person who is oppressed, any trigger warning, any person who is sexually assaulted would want to sexually assault other people as well. This is literally not true. But second thing, the white kids in the class, they are not the ones who inculcated that injustice on this teacher, and they don't the teacher, when he got this position after so long, wouldn't want to inflict oppression on these white kids as well by undervaluing their efforts, by we told you enough reasons for this in our first speaker case. And I believe at this point we're co-opting both morals, when the teacher is upholding its integrity, and it's also helping the kids it wants to help. And despite all the discrimination, this teacher is upholding its values. Now, second issue about where are the children better off, and here is going to be two sub issues, etc. When we told you about teacher jobs, etc., these people gave us two responses which were also very late, because I don't understand what they have been debating in first two speeches. In third speech, they said that this teacher won't be easily caught because it's already happens in Pakistan. People are literally increasing rates, etc. Do you realize how uncomparative that is? Because the people who are doing this in Pakistan are not minorities. Those are elite people who do have access to all of this, who do have money to get out of all of this. And at this point, I don't believe when we give you enough reasons for why this minority teacher is at a disadvantage, because this person is minority, people of other races, etc., are going to be wary of this person, and because they are racist and all of that, they are going to think of literally possible reasons to just get this person out of there, and reasons to discriminate against this person. At that point, they're going to keeping checks on this person, and he would not be able to do that. And you said that people are not going to notice it as much because this person is going to do it secretly. Firstly, we don't think that is even true. But like secondly, it's going to be like more noticeable and like not even going to help the students. Because think about it, if this teacher is like secretly in admin reports increasing grades of the student, and the student himself does not know about it, because the report is with the admin, the student does not know about it. And even when they get to know about it, the exam papers they have themselves, the marks are not adding up. I don't believe how then is that going to help the student, because they would probably think it's a mistake, because you used to told us that the teacher is not going to tell anyone about it. So I don't think this mechanism is very effective in the first place. And like what we told you about the teacher's job, etc., we told you the teacher is in a very critical position, and this is very important for the teacher to maintain the job. And we give you like more reasons for why this person would get caught, because when the even if the teacher increases marks on the test, it is very likely, even we do this, we literally check our tests with like each other, and we see where we didn't get enough marks, where we deserved it. And when then we go to like, if we see the teacher is being disadvantaged, then we're going to go and tell the people, we're going to go and tell other teachers. And at that point, I believe this student who are we very trying to protect is going to be subjected to bullying, etc., because these people, and there will be even more discrimination. And at this point, I believe this is like the teacher would also lose a job. It's important for the teacher to maintain the job, because it has to make sure that students even are not discriminating against each other. And my second speaker told you in his argument as well, when the teacher is able to like maintain its job, it's able to like use his position as an inspiration for the students, that he also was structurally disadvantaged, still succeeded as a teacher. Students can do that as well. That motivation enough serves as well. And secondly, about like this teacher like building resilience against these people, giving them reality checks. Okay, sure, you are structurally disadvantaged, but you have to face it, because so then when these people would then go out in the world, they would be resilient, they would be able to face the structural disadvantages. And otherwise in their side of the world, these people would not even be able to get jobs, because they have not been studying enough for that. On our side, we are helping them studying, we are helping them be better off. And I believe that's why.
Great. Thank you so much for that speech. With that, the substantive part this debate is now over. Opposition reply, you now have the floor.
Just give me a few seconds. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Oh, sorry. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think that all of side propositions arguments did not cater to the actor as a whole, right? What they had to do was, again, they had to tell us why the actor is likely to do the things that they have pointed out on their side. Um, we took this debate on several issues, right? Firstly, the first issue we took this debate on, we proved where the teacher feels like he owes a moral responsibility, right? We told you how this teacher, he needs to help these children, but not in a way that further exasperates their plight, right? Their response to this was, the teacher cannot. No analysis as to why the teacher cannot, except that the teacher does not have enough resources. Understand that is wrong in truth value for several reasons that we gave you already. Firstly, since the teacher is since he's a teacher, we think that he already has a sustainable income and he is not in any extreme situation of poverty, right? So we think that the teacher has enough money to actually help these kids in some form or another. Secondly, the teacher can invest his own time or and a lot of effort for these children, even if he does not have the required financial capital to help these children in a meaningful way. Secondly, we prove to you why the actor is very likely to not inflate the grades of these children in the first place, right? Two reasons. Firstly, we prove to you how this actor feels like he has a moral responsibility to not strengthen and support the unjust education system whose problems this actor had to place in his own childhood, right? For example, undiscriminatory teachers or expensive education, right? When this teacher inflates grades, he is actually supporting this system, and that goes against his own personal principles. I think humans are extremely complex creatures, and there are certain principles that every human stands by. This teacher is very not likely to undermine his own core principles simply for some small benefit that is not even tangible on their side, which they have already conceded. Secondly, we told you how this teacher knows that if he inflates their grades. We prove to you how this teacher will actually harm these children, and we think that this teacher is very likely to actually understand the consequences of this. So that's why we think that this actor is very likely to actually not inflate the grades. The third issue we took was about where children are better off, how children are better off on our side, right? We gave you so many reasons as to why children will be better off on our side, and they genuinely did not engage with anything we said, right? We told you how if these children are actually not given inflated grades and are actually socialized in a way to work harder, they will actually fulfill their own potential. These children, they will actually now feel better because they think they have gone against the system and still succeeded. It will be a form of catharsis for them, and they will actually they think it is more meaningful. We also prove to you why these children, they will now become more capable and more literate. What will this lead to, right? This will lead to them getting better jobs in the future, because inside propositions world, the only thing you're doing is bumping up their grades, and that will not help them in any practical way whatsoever. However, on our side, when we try to help these children in a more practical way, when we try to solve the core root of their problem, we actually help them. Then we told you that this will also lead to these children building resilience against the system and be able to fight against its injustices. And also we told you how these children will now become more aware of the reality that they're in, and they will understand that the system actually is pitted against them, and they have to work to fight against it. Before I end my reply speech, let me build a few comparatives. Firstly, understand that the intensity of harm that is inevitable if the teacher is caught, right, it far outweighs any incremental tokenistic benefit that increasing their grades could ever provide, right? Secondly, we also think that by helping these children in a more meaningful way, we are actually making them far more happy, and we are actually helping them in a far more meaningful way. Thank you. I think we easily take this debate.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for that speech. Proposition reply, you now have the floor to close the debate.
Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2.
Also, just a second. Judge, I gave the
Yeah.
reply speech because my first speaker was not feeling well, so he did not give the reply speech. I'm Ayan.
Wait. Okay, ठीक है. Thank you for letting me know. Proposition reply, you have the
Dhruva. Okay, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, a team loses the debate when inherently they don't even carry their own case. At op 1, the whole debate was on how favoritism is so bad. At op 2, now the teacher will lose their job, and op 3 again, it's about how favoritism exists. Panel, this inconsistency means that we cannot engage with them properly because they don't know what their own end goals are. Because notice that they've not identified a single end goal at side opposition. I think that at that point in time, they can never win this debate. There are two pieces of strategy that I'm really sad I have to do at this point in time. The first thing is, how does this inflation of grades takes place? By the way, I'm the eighth speaker of this debate. This shows to you how low quality debate is opposition is doing, because they literally forcing me to recharacterize this. There are two things within this. Number one, you have minor inflation, right? Notice that this looks like you having late submissions, and that is being fine. That means that your whole grade won't be finished because of that. Where you have linguistic issues, where if I use the British form of English and actively the school follows the American form of English, they're not going to deduct marks. These are the type of things that are taking place, and there may be grade within essay grade based questions. You may get 2 to 3, 4 to 5 marks extra in this manner, right? We told you that these these professors have autonomy in the way that they grade these papers. They have the capacity how they want to grade them, etc., etc. Then the only push that they have within their case is, oh hey, you will be actively caught if this actor tries to do that. There are three responses we have. Number one, notice that there's an editing of grade that already takes place. These these professors have a certain amount of autonomy to the extent to whatever they want to do, right? These are their students that actively do not have a lot of checking, and insofar as that is true, right? And secondly, notice that this is stuff that is so like minute, right? This is so difficult to change. Notice that if there's 2 to 3 marks being changed, nobody's gonna say that, oh hey, that guy is literally somebody who's favoring somebody. Rather, that is something that is of subjective nature that somebody could change in that nature, right? And notice that we gave you a benefit. Even if they are caught, they will develop discourse. This is something that they never engaged with. Notice that the discourse is developed on the fact that why is this even taking place? What is the active need for that person to for that teacher to take place? When we are actively going to highlight the fact that the system is so structurally against them, we said that there are benefits even if they're caught, even if they're not. And we told you that they're probably not going to get caught, right? And the third idea, I think they concede the principle, because notice that they do concede for op one that, oh hey, we do deserve, these people do deserve do deserve better than what they're getting off. Notice the sophistication of material we gave you at proposition. We told you that there is low cultural capital. That means that these people have less resources. The second fact is systemic bias exists, and thirdly, you have alienation existing within the status quo. Notice that they've never engaged on ideas such as systemic bias and alienation, where people just have simply lower resources. Rather, we say that they've conceded this case, and the principle will always be won by proposition. The only response that they had on the principle was that, oh hey, teachers don't want to be a part of the system by favoring other children. There are three responses we gave to this. Number one, they have an obligation to do this, because notice that they've suffered in the same manner, right? Notice the fact that a teacher became that this person became a teacher despite the challenges that she has faced. She or he understands the fact that inherently that it is very difficult for these people. And secondly, notice that empathy exists. Notice that they are the ones that resonate with the people and resonate with the suffering that has taken place. Notice that these are the people who understand, right? And we think that there's just simple justification to this. We're like because of the fact that society is shaped in such a manner which is unequal, it is then the responsibility of these people to at least push them on a level playing field. Again, something that opposition did not engage on. The second, on the practical clash. Notice that on their side of the world, they say that, oh, hey, children will be lazy. We told you that is simply untrue, because if you're lazy, teachers won't literally won't keep on giving you grades. They're not stupid. And secondly, notice that on our side of the world, you have a better positive fulfillings, positive ideology on our side of the world. Panel, on our side of the world, you get benefits and no negatives. That was something that I just thought of on spot. Give it to proper.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this debate, guys. Please virtually shake hands and then exit the room. The decisions will be announced in the main meeting.